All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're now get into talking about the Steelers Eagles game for this upcoming Sunday, the Battle of Pennsylvania. And both teams are playing good football right now. The Eagles are 11-2, Steelers are 10-3. I did talk about the Eagles. Well, actually, I talked about both teams yesterday. I talked about what Mike Tomlin said about Saquon Barkley, calling him the acquisition of the offseason, which it's valid. It's correct. And I also did bring up the little bit of drama that's going on in Philly between A.J.Brown and Jalen Hurts. And I still don't think it's that big of a deal. I said something along the lines of if they start losing games and things start to unravel, then it becomes a big deal. But, if this is going on and they're still winning games and it's not affecting, what's happening on the field, then it's not a big deal. But it could become a big deal. So, and they both said that they're good. Now, you could take it however you want. Yeah, they're probably lying. I don't know. We don't know. I don't know. I know just as much as you. No clue. But this is an interesting game. Now, for the Steelers, George Pickens is probably not playing in this game again. Didn't play last week against the Browns. But the Steelers' offense, Russ was still able to cook. He hit Pat Freiermuth over the middle for a touchdown. He had that nice catch by Mike Williams. The offense was still able to function without George Pickens. It did get off to a little bit of a slow start, but the offense started to move the ball, and they picked up the win. They forced a couple of turnovers. They got to Jameis Winston. But this is going to be a different kind of game because Jalen Hurts has done a good job at not turning the ball over. You also have to deal with Saquon Barkley and what he brings to the table and the kind of season that he's had. He's been unbelievable. And also, you're going to have to deal with two number one receivers in A.J.Brown and Devontae Smith. Now, these two teams did match up a couple years ago in Philly. I did bring that up yesterday. And A.J.Brown had 3 touchdowns in that game. And I think that's one of them right there. Minkah Fitzpatrick on the coverage there. I don't know if that's I think it's got to be one of the touchdowns, not some long reception. But anyways, A.J. Brown had a big game. So the Steelers got to do a good job at trying to minimize him. But also, the Eagles didn't have Saquon Barkley in that game. Now they do. So that's another thing that you have to really worry about is Saquon Barkley. And then on the other side, the Eagles defense has played really well this season. And this is going to be a test for that Steelers offense, and especially when you don't have George Pickens. Now, I think Russell Wilson has played some really good football. As of late, he has looked better than he has these past couple of years. But this is going to be a true test for him. And is he going to be able to deliver and, sorry, holding back yet another sneeze. Is he going to be able to live up to that challenge? And we'll have to wait and see. But both teams, when you look at their rankings, the Eagles are 30th in passing yards per game. The Steelers are 21st. Rushing yards per game, they're both top 10. The Eagles are first. They're averaging 190.5 rushing yards per game because you got to factor in Barkley, of course. Jalen Hurts can take off and run with it as well. Kenneth Gainwell has come in at certain points. But, yeah, the Eagles are a very good rushing team. And the Steelers aren't bad either. They're top 10. They're averaging 132.1 rushing yards per game. And then in terms of points per game, the Steelers are actually 10th and the Eagles are 8th. So if you're a Steelers fan, did you expect the Steelers to be top 10 in points per game with how the offenses looked these past couple of years? I don't think so. The Steelers, and they've gotten into some high-scoring games. You look at the Bengals game from a couple weeks ago. They put up, 30 points back-to-back games against the Raiders and the Jets. 28-27 against the Commanders. They scored 27 this past week against the Browns. They have put up some points in games. And then, they have some of those low-scoring games, like they They won 18-10 against the Falcons earlier this year, 13-6 against the Broncos, against the Ravens when Chris Boswell kicked 6 field goals. Well, he did it twice this year. Did it against the Falcons and he did it against the Ravens. So, Steelers can beat you a variety of ways, just like I talked about with the Rams before. And like I said, this is going to be a true test because when you look at the defensive rankings, the Eagles are third against the pass. They're holding opposing quarterbacks to under 200 yards, 199.5. Steelers are 18th. They give up an average of 235.2 passing yards per game. And then against the run, they're both top 10. Steelers are actually fourth at stopping the run, giving up an average of 91.5 rushing yards per game. And then the Eagles are eighth. They're giving up an average of 105.8. But I think when you look at the Steelers' running game compared to the Eagles' running game, you're going to favor the Eagles' running game in the matchup. The Steelers are going to have their hands full with Saquon Barkley. And then points allowed, both teams are top 10, or actually top 5, I should say. Eagles are second. They're giving up 18 points per game, and the Steelers are giving up 18.3. So not that much of a difference there. I could see this game being like a 20-17 contest, something like that. Maybe something similar to what we got when the Ravens and the Eagles matched up against each other. For me, I think it's going to really come down to how the Steelers' offense plays in this game. Is Russell Wilson going to be able to play well against this Eagles defense? I think he'll make his fair share of plays. That Eagles secondary has been good this year, and losing George Pickens for this game, it's not going to make things easier. Guys are going to have to step up. Calvin Austin, he's made plays for them this year. Pat Freiermuth has been playing well as of late. They've been getting him more involved. I think he could play a major role in this game. Again, try to establish the running game with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren has looked healthier as of late. So, the Steelers could definitely, keep this game close. Just as long as, the offense is able to move the ball and put up some points here. And then defensively, you got T.J.Watt on the edge. How is that Eagles offensive line going to match up against him? Are they going to be able to contain him? And then you got some of the other pass rushers as well that you're going to have to deal with. Cam Hayward and Herbig as well. So it's going to be interesting, this game. I don't think this game is going to be, like I said, I don't think this game is going to be as high scoring as the Bills-Lions game. But this game's going to be competitive. The Steelers right now, the line went up to 5.5. They're getting 5.5 points. I do think that's a lot. But this is the toughest part of their schedule. Now, they've done a great job so far. It started off with the Commanders. From the Commanders to the Browns now, they have gone, 4-1 in their last 5 games. And they did lose to the Browns in Cleveland in that snowstorm. But this 4-game stretch here, I'll throw the Bengals in there as well, just because, the Bengals are still going to be a tough team to beat. It took the Steelers having to score 44 points against them to win. 44-38, the final score of that game was. But you got the Eagles and the Ravens back-to-back road games. Then you have the Chiefs and the Bengals to close out the year. That's a tough stretch. Could the Steelers lose all 4? It's possible. I don't think they are. But, you don't want to slip up because the Ravens are right behind you. They're 2 games back. Ravens could easily, pick up a game on them this week because they will be taking on the New York Giants, which we will talk about in the next segment. So, it's important that the Steelers, they maintain this 2-game lead. So this is a big game for them. Both teams are playing good football right now. This is another game where it is very hard to pick. I did take the Steelers with the points in my spread pool. But in terms of who I think is going to win the game, right now I'm kind of leaning towards the Eagles just because they're at home. And I do give them the slight edge. I do think they are a better team than the Steelers. I think Russell Wilson is going to struggle against this defense. But I do think the Steelers will do enough offensively where they'll hang around in the game and keep it close. because I do think, you know, the Steelers, if they can contain Saquon Barkley and try to get Jalen Hurts to beat them, is Jalen Hurts going to be able to, rise up like I talked about Russell Wilson and, have a big game throwing it? Um, we'll have to keep an eye on that, of course. But I do think the Steelers will hang around in this game. But I do lean towards the Eagles right now. Like I said, I think this will be lower scoring than the game we just previewed before. Maybe it's a 21-17 game, 20-17, something like that. On the lower side, but we'll see. But yeah, I lean towards the Eagles right now in this matchup. I just think they're the better team, and I think with the Steelers missing George Pickens in this game, they are going to miss him. So guys are going to have to step up. Mike Williams, Calvin Austin, Pat Freiermuth. That's who you got to rely on. Van Jefferson scored a touchdown last week, and hopefully the Steelers can maybe get the running game going with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren in this game. But both teams are good at stopping the run. I think Saquon Barkley is going to have a good game, but we'll see how the Steelers' rushing attack does in this spot. But looking forward to it. This should also be a good game. Let me know what you guys think, though. Who do you have winning in this contest? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we will preview the remaining games in the final two segments. So we'll start off with the early slate of games, and then in the final part of the show, we'll take a look at the late slate, including the Sunday night game, which is the Packers and the Seahawks, which should be interesting as well. So there are some good games here on the slate. So with that being said, stick around, and we will be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.